The debate of 1.6 liter versus 1.8 liter Miatas has been going on since the 1.8 liter came out. Some people will claim that the 1.6 liter is better. As someone who boosted this 1.6 liter Miata, I could tell you exactly why I chose to boost this over a 1.8, and we're just going to give you a lot of technical detail about which you should or shouldn't get. Let's get right into it. So first, let's get into the similarities. Both the 1.6 liter and the 1.8 liter Miata are dual overhead cam 4-cylinder engines. They share the same connecting rods, which means that they could both make about the same amount of torque before rods start bending. This means that the 1.8 liter is not necessarily stronger, in this case, for making power under boost. Also, both the 1.6 liter and the 1.8 liter came with very similar 5-speed transmissions that could handle, once again, about the same amount of power, which is roughly 230 to 240 foot-pounds of torque before they start braking. Of course, depending on how you drive could change that. If you're dumping gears all the time and mashing through gears really hard, you might blow transmission sooner, but that's the number that you could expect from either a 1.6 or a 1.8 liter car. So, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of people will claim that the 1.6 liter is a better engine than the 1.8 liter. Now we're going to start getting into the differences and why you should pick a 1.6 liter over a 1.8 liter. But we're going to start with why you should pick a 1.8 liter over the 1.6 first, because, well, there's a lot more reasons to pick a 1.8 liter over a 1.6. The simple answer is that the 1.8 liter is, you guessed it, about 0.2 liters bigger than a 1.6. Now, this doesn't sound like much, but given the sizes of the engine, it's actually about 240 cc's, which is a fairly significant amount of displacement that the 1.8 has over the 1.6. Even with these small engines that come in Miatas, there's no replacement for displacement, and the bigger engine is going to be better for making power. From the factory, a 1.8 makes about 15 more horsepower than a 1.6, which is pretty significant for a car that only makes about 115 crank horsepower if you get a 1.6. This means that in naturally aspirated situations, the engine will be torquier down low and it will have more power all throughout the rev range versus the 1.6, which you really need to rev out and ring out in order to get good power out of it. Also, the 1.8 liter has a better head design which flows more efficiently, which means, well, you can make more power easily. The 1.6 is a little bit more restrictive, which means it's actually harder to make power with than the 1.8 liter. And at a high level, that's really all you need to know for naturally aspirated cars, 1.6 versus 1.8. The 1.8 is going to make more power, and it's going to make more power easier as you start to modify it. Now let's move on to turbocharged applications and why you would want, once again, the 1.8 or the 1.6. A lot of people will tell you the 1.6 is the better engine to boost, and I'll tell them, I don't know why you think that. There's really no reason to boost the 1.6 liter over a 1.8 unless you already have one, which I'll get into later. Being that the 1.6 liter is a smaller engine over the 1.8, it's going to have a harder time spooling up a turbo, meaning that boost is going to build slower in a 1.6 versus a 1.8. Remember that displacement is the amount of air that's going through your engine, and having more air going through your engine means more exhaust, means faster turbo spool, which means you'll be making power earlier in a 1.8 with a turbo versus a 1.6 with a turbo. Also, you need to keep in mind that when you're out of boost, like I talked about earlier, the 1.8 is going to be making more torque and more power, so it'll have more power out of boost than a 1.6 liter. Also, once again, 1.8s, especially 99s and 2000s, have better flowing head design than a 1.6 liter, which means, once again, even with the turbo on there, it's going to be easier to make power with that engine versus a 1.6 liter. The difference between 1.6 liter and 1.8 liter doesn't stop with the motors. 1.6 liter cars, if you get a 90 to 93, are going to come with a slightly smaller diameter clutch that can't handle quite as much power. This means that if you're going with a pretty mild build where you're not going to be upgrading your clutch, the 1.8 will be able to hold more power before you need to replace your clutch. Also, the 1.6 liter cars have much more fragile drive lines than the 1.8. Specifically, the differential in a 1.6 liter is like glass compared to a 1.8 that's much more strong. The 1.6 liter differentials could only handle about 200 horsepower before they're pretty much guaranteed to break, whereas the 1.8 has been taken up to around 400 horsepower without too many problems. If you have a turbocharged car or a car that you want to beat on a lot, you're definitely going to want a 1.8 liter differential, and in my case, I'm swapping a 1.8 liter diff into my 1.6 so it could handle the power without problems. And so guys, with that, that'll wrap up reasons why the 1.8 liter is better than the 1.6. But you'll remember, a lot of people said that the 1.6 liter is better than the 1.8. Why might they think that, and what is really why you should buy a 1.6 over a 1.8? To start out, some people claim that the 1.6 is a more free-revving engine, which I guess you could claim. They do come with a slightly lighter flywheel, and they could rev a little bit easier. After that, there's really no reason to get a 1.6 over a 1.8 other than this. 1.6 motors are less desirable, so they're generally cheaper than 1.8 liters. With that said, there were less of them made, and as people blow them up, as the cars get old, there's becoming less and less, and there are a lot more 1.8 liter motors out there, so the prices might not stay low for too long. Also, if you're going to turbo one of these cars, it's pretty easy to find a really durable, cheap turbo manifold, which is what I have on my car, which is around $100. If you want to get a really good setup with a 1.6 or a 1.8, you're going to be spending money no matter what, so turboing a 1.6 doesn't really save you money over turboing a 1.8. Another reason that's actually a performance reason why you could say the 1.6 is better than a 1.8 is these cars are slightly lighter. Now, they have less safety features, they have less chassis bracing, which makes them lighter, but they are lighter than 1.8 liter cars. Also, being simpler technology, since they are made before OBD2, you could get cheaper standalone ECUs for these cars, whereas that stuff's still being developed for cars that went OBD2. Also, keep in mind that you could get an OBD1 1.8 liter Miata if that's what you want. So to wrap up, there really aren't too many reasons to get a 1.6 over a 1.8. Why did I turbo my 1.6 liter over a 1.8 liter Miata? The answer is really quite simple, and that it's I already had a 1.6 liter in my Miata. I didn't want to take the time to put a 1.8 into my Miata, and I didn't want to get a completely different car to start modifying and turbocharging and working on. Having a turboed Miata is better than not having a turboed Miata, and that was basically the deciding factor for choosing the 1.6 over the 1.8. If you want to see a real-world comparison between a 1.6 and a 1.8, be sure to subscribe to the channel, because in the spring I'll be doing a video that compares them on the street with GPS data to show you which is faster where, and basically back up why I made this video and all the points that I went over in it. With that said, in summary, the only reason that you should turbo or pick up a 1.6 liter car is 1, if it's significantly cheaper, and 2, you should turbo it if you already have one. If not, go for the 1.8 liter. It's pretty much better across the board. I'm sorry to all my 1.6 people out there. I love my 1.6 liter Miata, but the 1.8 is just a better car. With that said, don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe for more Miata content, and I hope you stick around for the next one. Take care.